Hello and welcome to a review of Brian M. Stableford's Wildblood's Empire, a book I've just finished and which I really enjoyed. So Brian M. Stableford, or that's Brian Michael Stableford, was an English author. He wrote quite a lot of books. He was very well known. He was an exceptional, by the sound of it, influential part of the English science fiction scene. He was an academic, a biologist and a sociologist primarily, which comes through in his writing very much, especially in this one. And he died sadly only last year. It was last month that I read the first book of his that I've read for a long time, though I have read his short stories before. That was The Halcyon Drift, and I enjoyed it. It's reviewed on Goodreads, and on YouTube. And I enjoyed it so much that ever since then I have been trying desperately to keep my hands off the other Brian M. Stableford books that I owned. Now, I was trying to keep my hands off them because Wildblood's Empire and the other two I own belong in a series. It's the Daedalus Mission novel series, and this is number 3, and the other two I have are 4 and 6. And I felt that as a responsible adult, I should pay more attention to reading series in order and not just randomly books whenever I find them. But I wanted to read them, and I'm well aware that I may never find the other ones, so I read them. And it turns out that with this series at least, or at least this novel in it, it works pretty well out of sequence. Now, the novel series is called the Daedalus Mission, and in Greek mythology, of course, Daedalus was this incomparable artisan. He was a skillful architect and a craftsman and an artist, and he was seen as a symbol of knowledge, wisdom, and power. And probably what most people remember him for is being the father of Icarus. But the reason why Daedalus and his son Icarus were incarcerated on an island was because this amazing craftsman had created the Minotaurs. Was it the Minotaurs labyrinth? I'm pretty sure it was, and he was incarcerated there so that he wouldn't be able to tell anyone how to get through it. Now, I think these days most people remember Icarus more than they remember Daedalus. Icarus is the one who put on the wings and was so enraptured by the power of flight that he flew too close to the sun, the glue on the wings melted, and he fell to his death. But Daedalus was the one who designed the wings, and Icarus just forgot to read the brief, as is pointed out by our main protagonist, Alex, on page 70 of this book, when the myth is vaguely referenced. I feel like I'm probably missing something about this series. I think that Icarus might have been one of the previous missions, and Daedalus is this mission that we're reading about in Wildblood's Empire. And maybe one day I'll find that out. The world building and universe building, like in the other Stableford I read, are the things that really did it for me in this book, that I thought were magnificent. So they made the book stand out and made me enjoy it thoroughly. So let's start with the universe building. Now, in this particular future universe, at some point in human history, humans got interstellar travel, and they sent out these scouting missions in various directions to find worlds that may be available for colonization by humanity. We know they sent geologists and ecologists and other various experts of different kinds on these missions, and that reports were sent back to Earth, including one about this particular world. Having sent out these missions, and then they sent out a number of colonizers to different worlds. The world that this story occurs on was originally called Poseidon by the Earth Committee. It was a water world, almost entirely water, with a series of islands, and it was one of the ones surveyed in that early surveying phase, and it was one of the ones that was colonized when the various worlds were colonized. And I did wonder rather if that was the Icarus phase, but I don't know. Anyhow, once these worlds were colonized, a political shift back on Earth meant that there was an 80-year moratorium completely on star travel, and that resulted in all the colonies that had just been established being completely isolated from Earth for a few generations. And now our team is one of the ships, or is either the ship or one of these ships, I'm not sure, that's being sent out to re-establish contact with the colonies and assess them. So they're meant to contact the colonies, assess how the colony is doing, possibly provide assistance if required, possibly supply condemnation if required, because essentially they're there to report back to Earth on how the colonies are doing, what the pros and cons are. And we get the sense that a lot is riding on these reports because the future of colonizing other worlds is up in the air. And if too many of the reports say that the colonies aren't viable or the colonies haven't been successful, it may well result in reduction of exploration or possible future colonization. So we get the sense of this need to meet certain requirements, and our protagonist isn't always happy about that. And we get also the feeling that this is book 3, world 3 that they've visited, and that the previous worlds were challenging, and it's starting to not look good for the future of colonization. But then on to the world building. So this world was originally named Poseidon, but Wildblood, who was the surveying ecologist, also chose to be their leader of the colonization team. And apparently Earth liked that, because if the surveyor chooses to come back and colonize, it makes it look good. Other people want to colonize as well. He obviously liked it so much, saw so much potential, that he wanted to come back. Now, in the generations, and we gather there's at least 4 generations of isolation from Earth, James Wildblood has become almost an ancestor to worship figure on this colony. He's shaped the colony, he's shaped it physically, he's mapped out its future direction, he's helped shape it socially, and the colony has just followed along the lead, the rules that he established, the laws, and are still obeying him, even though he is several generations dead. Now, the current head of the colony is his descendant Philip, who still lives in this huge manor house that James Wildblood built. And it is this true hereditary empire. And our protagonist talks about the excess, if you will, in building this enormous manor house, which was never really required for that many people. It was excessive. And it had excesses of glass on window panes and on glass collection cases, when glass was a precious resource on the colony. It had iron, and in the early days iron was a precious resource as well, but Wildblood just squandered it to make his manor house feel imperial. So it is this true hereditary empire. There's an upper class or nobility feeling, and it's based on how much genetic material basically you got from Wildblood, who had 4 kids, 2 girls, 2 boys. And at the time this novel starts, our ship and its team have contacted the colony and are guests of the colony and are being shown around, or at least 2 main ones are. So we've got Nathan, who's the negotiator of the team. We're told he's not actually the leader, but he behaves as the leader, and the Wildblood colony treats him as a leader. The other person who is staying at the manor house is Alex. He's our protagonist and narrator. He's there with Nathan. He's a bit dissatisfied due to previous worlds, and he is the ecologist. And his interest is biology, and my interest is biology, and so seeing the world through his rather cynical at times, cynical and dissatisfied eyes is interesting. Now, it's obvious to Nathan and Alex and the rest of the team that they're not wholly trusted. When anyone is left, the ship is has grounded some way away. There are 2 people with the ship at all times. One of them is the engineer who primarily cares for the ship. The second, Jane, I think her name is, I'm not clear at this point what her actual speciality is. They've remained with the ship. 2 other staff members are elsewhere on the ground. Nathan and Alex are in the manor house in the colony, which is some distance from the ship, too far for an easy walk. When they commute to it, they go by horseback or in a carriage. So it's obvious that they're not wholly trusted. The ship is under constant observation, and so are they. Anytime they leave the manor house, someone accompanies them, either right with them or in the crowd, or possibly both. And there's also this sense of unease and unrest in the colony that makes us feel that all is not right in the Wildblood Empire. Now, at the beginning of the book, we start with nighttime. Alex is on his way, sneaking out of the manor house to a rendezvous with a member of the rebellion, resistance, we don't know, who's contacted him illicitly and wants to have a chat with him in the cemetery. It's a very suitable gothic feel, but a cemetery, a good historical cemetery, has another function in any society. It tells you a lot about that society. It tells you who the people were, what their families or themselves wanted remembered on their grave after death, how long they lived, how many children they have. So we get this pretty organic introduction to the colony as Alex moves around the graveyard reading the gravestones. Now, when he encounters this contact, the contact's very cheery about what's happening. He's giving out hints. He's saying, oh, if you knew what was really happening, but he isn't really revealing much. And he clearly doesn't entirely trust Alex, who doesn't entirely trust him. One thing Alex does get from him is a piece of code on paper. So it's not the whole code he's told, but if he can solve that and give it back to them, then he'll receive the rest of the coded message that they're trying to code break. Now, Alex returns to the manor house and he's restless, uneasy. He doesn't like the hereditary nobility any more than they like him. He isn't happy there. Nathan is making his contacts and doing good things, but Alex himself is not that happy. The other thing he receives from this dissatisfied member of the colony is a bit of powder, which we gather is a drug, and he goes back to the ship with it to analyze what it is and figure out how it works. So that gives us a lot more introduction to the biology and the background of the mission, the other people who are members of it, and it introduces us to the two team members that we don't actually meet throughout this book, who are elsewhere on the planet doing the really big, important ecology thing, which is also where Alex would rather be. He'd rather be with them. Because the big thing about this planet, unlike any of the other planets they've visited, is that it is unique in having an indigenous intelligent species. And here is where the novel really took flight for me. I love the ecological concepts of this water world. I love water worlds in general, but this water world was so exciting in the fact that the interior was all very arid, and so all life had to revolve around the water. And in this water world, an amphibious style of life has remained more common because there's so little ability to expand onto the land. Only it's amphibious in the marine environment rather than the aquatic environment. We don't actually have any amphibious marine animals on Earth, but on Poseidon / Wildblood, they do. Now, so this whole ecology as it's laid out, and it's pretty lightly laid out to be honest, but I adored it and I bonded with the world based on that. I also was blown away by the way Stableford proposed the intelligent species. It's completely unlike many intelligent species in being an aquatic race, similar to amphibious, only marine. The only analogous type of species that I can think of is James Blish's Case of Conscience. He had a aquatic, reptilian, amphibious type race, and it's not a thing you see too often. I really loved what Stableford did with it. So not only is it amphibious, but it's a neotenous species. Now, neoteny is this really exciting biological concept where an immature member of the species becomes sexually reproductively mature, and we see that on Earth. We see it mostly in axolotls, which are a type of salamander. Axolotls and efts are the immature phase of the adult salamander, and they're aquatic, whereas salamanders aren't entirely aquatic. But axolotls and some efts develop the ability to breed as a juvenile species. So, incidentally, Jared Diamond has hypothesized that humans are indeed a neotenous race, in that we display immature characteristics within our nearest relatives, the chimpanzees, and we continue to display childlike attributes compared to adult chimpanzees. So the hypothesis is that we ourselves are a neotenous race that have become intelligent. And I'm quite certain that Stableford was playing with that ahead of Jared Diamond. So, we've got these adult reproductive individuals in the marine environment, but we also have adult reproductive stages on land, and we've got juvenile stages in both the marine and the terrestrial environments. So it's this really complex, fascinating concept, and I loved it, and I thought he did a great job presenting it. The other thing about it that thrilled my biologist's heart is that Stableford has created an R selection species rising to intelligence. So, okay, an R selection species, by the way, that's a small r. In population ecology, it refers to a specific type of reproductive strategy. We talk mostly about two types of reproductive strategy, and the R1 is where species prioritizes large numbers of smaller offspring with which have high growth rates, rapid reproduction, often in unstable or unpredictable environments like turtles, fish eggs, etc. So these species will typically produce many offspring with very little parental care. So the entire biological parental investment comes in producing heaps of them on the assumption that a small percentage of them will survive. So that's one reproductive strategy in population ecology. The other is owls, very small number of species, huge parental investment, but also a higher percentage surviving to maturity. So I don't think there have been too many, again James Blish, but other than James Blish, too many other people who've hypothesized an R selection reproductive strategy reaching intelligence. So marine turtles or fish or any small squishy invertebrate, that's almost always a R reproductive selection. And most ecologists in the 70s did not consider it possible for an R selection species to rise to intelligence. So well done, Stableford, on doing something that was really quite unique in science fiction. Now, all of that, which is what I really loved and I've just talked about extensively, that's kind of not really central to the story. It's the background to the story. The story is mostly Alex trying to uncover the secrets, both the biological and ecological and zoological and hereditary and very, very social, of this colony. This colony that is keeping these secrets, which revolve around this drug and revolve around Wildblood's hereditary family empire. So in those regards, this is a bit of a mystery and very much a thriller type feel to it. You've got the mystery that Alex is trying to solve. You've got Nathan trying to be political and negotiator. And they've got both of them striving for things with relation to continual colonization of other worlds. I'm not going to really spoiler how the plot goes down. I think the book is worth reading and I don't want to spoiler it. I loved it. I will probably reread it in a year or two. There are a couple of interesting battles. It's quite clear that Stableford did not specialize in fighting scenes, and he does a very good writing method of saying that he doesn't, by saying Alex himself is not a fighter, and so he can't really say exactly what happened. But he still writes them in quite a fascinating, thrilling way. One of them is toward the end, and it's a bit of the climax of the whole mystery of what the colony is doing and how. Da-da-da-dum. It's pretty bad, but it could be worse. So, while I enjoyed this book entirely, and I read it quite fast for its size and fairly continuously, I do feel like there's a point around the 2/3 mark where the plot slows down. Alex becomes too scattered and too irate with everything that communicates to the reader, but it recovers well, and the ending of it is quite brilliant, I'm going to say. I loved the ending. I can't imagine anyone finishing this book and not thinking the ending was good. It didn't even feel like a continuation, even though there's a second book, which I am picking up 10 minutes after I finish this video. I have to read it next. So, yes, the whole concept is excellent in my opinion. The contact with many different colonies on different worlds in this series, the Daedalus series, is going to give Stableford a chance to showcase a whole range of worlds and ecologies, perhaps even more intelligent species, which is something that he does so really well in this one. So reading it out of sequence is also okay. It's clear that you're missing earlier books, and if you're a completionist that way, it might bother you. Didn't bother me that much. There's some reference to previous events. Alex has previous injuries from previous worlds, some of which were clearly worse than this colony in many ways, which adds to the ambiguity of when you should condemn a colony and how many colonies can be condemned and still hope to have more colonization in the future. So aside from those previous worlds that are mentioned, this coy mention of Muriel's talent, I've still got no idea what Muriel's talent is, but it's being used to help contact the indigenous intelligent species. Now, I'm really curious to see if they leave anyone on that world to continue working with this indigenous species, because they've given them written language, they've developed communication with them. It's mostly hand signals with a few sounds. I'm really excited for more Wildblood's world, to be honest, but I'm also excited for more of Stableford's writing. Now, while I was reading up a bit on it, there's very little about the Daedalus mission on the internet. As far as I can tell, the only person who has reviewed it before is David Langford, who reviewed it for White Dwarf. I don't remember reading it there, though I might have. I did read a lot of White Dwarf magazines. So Langford stated that they're readable, low-key, unpretentious science fiction containing meaty ideas. I agree with the meaty ideas. But his idea that the characters are low-key, maybe not completely unrealistic. The characters aren't hugely developed, but I found them perfectly adequate for the purpose, and I disagree with David Langford on the notion that the writing is merely functional. Everything I've seen of Stableford suggests that he isn't a lyrical writer, but he's a very, very adequate, very, very craftsman-like writer. So, thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. I do recommend it. But go away and read good books, maybe the Daedalus Mission books by Stableford, maybe other Stableford if you could find it, but in any case, read good books.